Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack. Welcome to the New Stack Makers, a podcast where we talk about application development, deployment, and management at scale. The Cloud Foundry Foundation is an independent nonprofit organization formed to sustain the development, promotion, and adoption of Cloud Foundry as the industry standard platform for cloud applications. Cloud Foundry is an application platform. It provides a choice of clouds, developer frameworks, and application services. Cloud Foundry makes it faster and easier to build, test, deploy, and scale applications. It's an open source project and is available through a variety of private cloud distributions and public cloud instances. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org. Hey, it's Alex Williams of the New Stack, and I'm here at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Europe, and I had the chance now to speak with Dormain Drewitz, Senior Director of Product Marketing at Pivotal. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm well. And we were talking about the user journey just before we got started. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, after our conversation, how you really define the user journey today. Has it adapted, or has it remained fundamentally the same?
Well, so there's a couple of different user journeys that are really happening. You've got user journeys at the developer level. You have user journeys at more of the platform engineering level.
Right.
And the teams that are operating and building the platforms. And then you have user journeys kind of more at the business level, and what does this really mean for lines of business and how their whole relationship to software. What Abby was referring to in her keynote about making things a more software-centric approach. So things have evolved, I think, for all three of those different users. And if we start with the platform, kind of the platform teams, folks who are cloud engineers is sort of another way I like referring to them. I don't like calling them operators because I think that sort of makes it sound like they're just sort of plugging a switch in and seeing if it's working. And I think that those folks are doing a lot more than that.
Yeah.
They're really building the cloud systems for their developers.
Right.
I think those teams, what we're seeing is there's a lot of folks who are adopting now who are benefiting from a lot of the learnings that earlier adopters, both in the Cloud Foundry community, and I think this kind of extends beyond it, but they're benefiting from the lessons of earlier adopters, right? So they're able to move along faster along the curve. It's sort of like the younger sibling syndrome, right? Like, keep seeing my older sister get into trouble. I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
So I think
don't know about you, but I'm the oldest.
Well, I'm the youngest. So, you've got a little bit of that going on, which, those teams have at least in the Cloud Foundry community, have a really interesting role where Cloud Foundry provides a really powerful engine, but realistically, in any given enterprise, folks have to build and extend that to really make it work for their environment, right? Nothing exists in a vacuum. You can't just plunk this down and, we're done. A lot of folks, CF Push is an amazing experience, but more and more folks are really incorporating CF Push with their adoption of CI and CD tooling.
Right.
And so the developers don't even actually touch CF Push, right? They're not using that command. They're, engaged much earlier in a CI/CD pipeline. And that CI/CD pipeline includes a lot of the controls that are needed for, a regulated industry or, what have you. And that entire experience is really part of, what the air quotes platform experience is at that enterprise. And so the teams that I think are benefiting from the learnings of earlier adopters is sort of, okay, this is what we need to take on and own, and this is the extent of the experience that we need to manage for our developers. Now, developers have kind of a different, the kinds of things they're focused on, their concerns have been different from the more of the platform builders. For them, you've had things like the rise of serverless, right? Microservices, continues to be sort of a big move and change for a lot of folks. And I think that serverless builds on a lot of those principles. It does sort of require you must be this tall to ride. You have to understand eventing architectures, and this is not trivial.
No.
And the other thing that I think is really, critical, I'm hearing more and more about, is really the recognition around app modernization and moving beyond thinking of, why cloud native apps are truly cloud native, as in they were born and didn't exist anywhere, but this idea of modernizing and how we need to embrace modernization of our core applications as a primary initiative. Things like the Windows 2008 kind of going out of support next year, putting huge pressure on .NET teams to figure out what are we going to do for the future of these applications. Obviously, some changes in the Java ecosystem.
So the user journey could include those platform engineers who are building the platforms themselves.
Right.
The developers who are writing code on top of the platform.
Right, and they're adopting patterns, right? Yeah. And they're trying to solve problems with these different patterns.
And who's the third user persona?
It's the business, right? And I think there you're talking about what is their relationship to software in actually changing their business? So I was just chatting with someone about, we've seen some things where folks create these innovation centers, and so they're doing cool stuff, but it doesn't necessarily change the business. And so I think a journey that the sort of lines of businesses need to be on is, how is this actually going to drive revenue for us? How do we bring all of this change and transformation at the technology layer into our core business, and it's not just someone's shiny promotion project off on the side, right? Where it's, okay, so cool, you built some IoT, event-driven, serverless, mobile experience, but none of it talks to any of our core back-end systems, and it's not driving any revenue, right? Someone might have gotten a nice title promotion out of that, but, has anything changed?
Can't blame them.
Right, but it's like, there's the politics side, but if you can recognize, no, this is an opportunity for us to gain market share, to change how we market to our customers. Looking at things like T-Mobile and the T-Mobile Tuesdays.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, and it's sort of this, you forget that there's a
Taco
huge,
Bell.
Oh yeah, we're going to get Taco Bell this week, Netflix subscription this week, right? And so I think you have to realize that type of marketing gimmick has a lot of implications for back-end systems, right? You've got to be able to reconcile into every individual who responded to that promotion, reconcile into their core billing system what they're now entitled to. And change every week.
Yeah, every vaporous offer has to have something behind it.
Right, and so, since they've introduced that, you've seen the trajectory that T-Mobile's been on in terms of they're gaining subscribers, and it's they're in a market that's not growing, right? It's all about taking share. There's no natural growth that's occurring organically in terms of there's just more and more people. It's no, people have a certain number of people, and they all have phones already. They all have mobile plans. You just got to take control of that subscriber from another vendor.
So I have a question then. So now we have these three profiles.
Yep.
The platform engineers, the developers, and the business operators, so to speak, right? What are some of the challenges you're seeing in the user journey for each one of those groups now that they're needing to really, find their way into the next kind of dimension of their work?
Yeah. So I spend quite a bit of time with folks who are in that platform engineer, cloud engineer sort of persona. And I think one of the big things that we've seen kind of emerge as a critical mindset shift that can make or break the success of that team is this notion of the platform as product. So my colleague Cote, I think he's on stage right now.
Oh, is he now?
Talking about this. And I think you'll appreciate kind of the sort of effect that this has on someone like me, right? Like I'm a Bay Area native. I live in the Silicon Valley bubble, and for years have run into so many people. They've got these entrepreneurial spirits. They all want to start companies. How do you harness that? But you're inside of an organization, and you bring that mentality. But you're talking about folks who've largely been kind of on the other side of an IT ticketing system, and they don't necessarily wake up thinking about their product in terms of, these are my customers, I want to get more customers. Their customers in this case being developers, just internal developers. So that's the opportunity that folks have. The folks that get it completely embrace the ownership and build and move so quickly because they now are adopting all of these things that, the Silicon Valley bubble eats up all the time, right, in terms of lean practices and everything. But you're applying this to a population that hasn't really thought of themselves that way. So the folks that embrace it move very fast. And so I think something that, we're trying to communicate to more of the folks in that cloud engineer role is, this is your opportunity. This is how you're going to
what?
To not only change your whole career in terms of the satisfaction you're going to get out of the work that you do, but also make sure that what you're building has the impact that it could have.
So how do they do that? What's your recommendation to them? What works? What doesn't work?
Yeah, I think it starts with kind of that mindset, recognizing, it's I'm not just taking things from a ticketing system. It's like, well, I built the thing you asked for, I'm done. It's more like, okay, these are my customers. What are their problems? And how do I build solutions to the problems that they have? Right. So a couple of years ago, even Liberty Mutual has been on this path for a while, was sharing about how they noticed it was taking developers 22 days to get on the platform because there's all these hoops they had to jump through in terms of mostly identity, setting up credentials, all this other stuff that they had to get. It was taking 22 days. So they focused on attacking those problems so that the developer experience, again, they're drawing the lines of the platform bigger than what you would expect. And they're saying, okay, that's part of the problem we need to solve. And they got it down to 24 hours. Now a developer who joins Liberty Mutual is on the platform in a day. So as we see folks kind of take that mentality, and they're doing more engineering work because they have to automate and solve problems inside their company. The talk that I'm giving tomorrow is around then the marketing side of it. It's like, well, if you've got a product, now you got to learn how to do product marketing.
Yeah.
Something I've been doing for a little while. And
but it's different product marketing now, isn't it? Because from our experience at least, it's like narratives. You got to be thinking more about how do you build your own narrative. Like, how do you think about, what are you explaining? What are you helping people understand more than just marketing kind of your skill set?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you're trying to, creating an identity for the platform we've found is something really important. So when folks actually brand it, they give it a brand identity.
Which has to relate to their core vision and values,
right?
And mission.
Yep, and so they put a name on that. And then you're creating a continuous cycle of updates, right? You don't just launch one and done. You've got to, things are going to be constantly changing. You need to open up channels of communications with your developers. Because it's like, you might do this, big reveal, we've got a new platform, and it's based on Cloud Foundry, we've got pipelines to deploy onto, and it's like, well, no one was listening. That one day you decided to announce that. Yeah. You've got to catch them, week after week, month after month, and listen to their feedback. Yeah. And it's like, that's what we do all the time with a product. So there's all kinds of areas that start to come into play, and it can be really exciting. And I've folks here in Europe have told me that they're surprised. They're like, I'm spending 50% of my time marketing internally to my developers because I'll get my first workloads, but then I've got to go hunt and get those next workloads. At a certain point, you start to get critical mass, but then the marketing job just changes a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Just like when you have a product, a software product for the commercial market. depending on where you are in the cycle, you're still doing that work. It's just going to change as your user base evolves, as it grows, et cetera.
And that plays into the overall way that open source software works too, in many respects, in terms of working. If you're building out software, architectures, and you're inside of an organization maybe with multiple teams, you got to know what everyone's doing, because you may need some of the components that they're developing.
Yeah, you have to think a little bit differently about what you're building. Like, am I building this in a way that can be shared?
Yeah.
That someone else can pick up and make use of it? Am I documenting it well?
Yeah.
Am I making it understandable?
Yeah.
Right. So to the accessibility keynote from this morning, there's a lot of great examples
that
in
was
that.
wonderful. I really enjoyed that.
And
that, just for the audience's perspective, that was by, I'm forgetting her name.
Gina Holden.
Gina Holden. And she talked about accessibility and inclusiveness, and how you, for example, think of a handicap ramp. And you could put it in the loading dock behind the building, but you could also make it more inclusive, so it's something where people can use, but also others can sit down on the steps and kind of enjoy a sunny day, whatever.
Right, it's designed in as opposed to kind of tacked on in this sort of awkward, ugly way.
Yeah.
And you see this with software all the time. We're all be moderating a user group. Someone's built something really cool, to solve a problem in their organization. Others may have the same challenge. And someone asks, like, oh, have you open sourced it? Is there a GitHub repo you can point us to? And then it's like, well, gosh, that's interesting. We'd have to make some changes, right? Like, you can tell they weren't designing it with that in mind. So you have to sometimes be conscious and deliberate about, am I building this so that others can pick it up and use it in ways that I may not anticipate?
So I guess one of the questions I want to ask about this user journey is this, this need for more developers that we're facing all the time.
Yeah.
And I actually was at VMworld, and I went to the Future Net event that they did. It was mostly networking engineers, and there was a senior corporate vice president from the Azure group at Microsoft talking about how if they don't have more software engineers on their team in the future, they're going to be done.
Yeah.
Secondly, if those software engineers don't come from a variety of backgrounds, the product's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
Right. So people who are in underrepresented communities or underrepresented minorities, what do you see is happening? How are they moving into these spaces?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that that even the people who are hiring should be aware of too?
Yeah. Well, so I want to step back a little bit. I think that one of the secrets of success that I've seen from folks adopting Cloud Foundry, but I think this applies more broadly to just any kind of software transformation, is folks who are, they're making a conscious and deliberate effort around developer enablement. And that can encompass a number of things, but I think it starts with the recognition that developers weren't born necessarily knowing what 12-factor applications are, right? You might have hundreds or thousands of developers today, and it's a mistake to sort of assume that they're going to just automatically know this stuff, or that they're all finding the time on the side somehow to learn about this. It's like, so if you want your developers to be building in a cloud native way, you kind of need to step up to enable them to do that, right? So it's amazing when you show up for a lunch and learn and there's free pizza, people are totally there to learn.
Yeah.
I mean, so you can fill the room, right? So coming back to T-Mobile, they've been doing regular kind of 101 classes where they go through these cloud native concepts. Another interesting thing, speaking of kind of bringing in folks from different backgrounds, I don't know if you remember in Philadelphia the story that the Home Depot shared about the orange method,
right?
Where, again, they're taking a very conscious and deliberate approach to enabling the developers, and they're including people with sort of non-technical backgrounds who have the aptitude and the interest, and they're now including them in their internal training and enablement program. So it's a big investment that I think a lot of companies aren't used to making, but the ones that are really succeeding are recognizing they need to make this investment in this sort of like, arm wringing of like, we need more developers. It's like, you have developers. You need to invest in upskilling them to the cloud native practices and patterns that they need to know. And you can include people who might already be working for your company. Liberty Mutual has done a similar thing, right? Like taking business analysts and reskilling them. Heard about, I think at Garmin, they're taking like sort of SQL analysts and reskilling them to write Java microservices. So upskilling and reskilling, like this is an investment that you could leave it up to sort of the individuals to solve for themselves, or you can kind of get out of the back seat and into the driver's seat and take control of that destiny and say, no, we're going to put a program together that's going to regularly get in front of our own developers to upskill and reskill. And then we're going to find that we can solve some of our talent shortage challenges without even going outside of our four walls.
There's so much more that I wanted to discuss here today with you, Dormain. This has really been really interesting. I guess my last question then really is about the future of CF then, and how it works with users. And it seems like that CF under the VMware umbrella has a future. But what does CF have to do you think, to really continue its momentum, to continue its strength?
Yeah.
And kind of with that user journey as a context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the focus of the developer experience within Cloud Foundry has been, it's really the big claim to fame for a long time. And so that focus needs to continue. And I think, at Pivotal, we're working on new ways to expose those developer productivity enhancements. And a lot of it's based on Cloud Foundry technology. So I think that's where the Cloud Foundry community needs to continue to focus and gain from, the sort of the Kubernetes substrate, sort of picking up certain pieces of the underlying infrastructure layer that, to Craig's point this morning, should be boring. But those developer experience challenges, those aren't really solved anywhere else in the same way. And so that is what we continue to hear from folks is, regardless of kind of all the development, great work that's been happening in the Kubernetes ecosystem, at the end of the day, what is that developer experience? What's going to make them most productive?
Exactly. Well, Dormain, thank you so much for taking the time. We've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, you bet. We covered the profiles of the user, and your focus on platform engineers in particular, but also to developers and the business community, the business operators, so to speak. We talked about the particular challenges in platform engineering and how there needs to be more of a marketing focus. And then we talked about Cloud Foundry and its future. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
Great.
The Cloud Foundry Foundation is an independent nonprofit organization formed to sustain the development, promotion, and adoption of Cloud Foundry as the industry standard platform for cloud applications. Cloud Foundry is an application platform. It provides a choice of clouds, developer frameworks, and application services. Cloud Foundry makes it faster and easier to build, test, deploy, and scale applications. It's an open source project and is available through a variety of private cloud distributions and public cloud instances. Learn more at cloudfoundry.org. Listen to more episodes of the New Stack Makers at thenewstack.io/podcasts. Please rate and review us on iTunes, like us on YouTube, and follow us on SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.